Alright guys, time for another one. This is my noob-friendly Elementalist build here. Again, just like my other videos that I do, it's supposed to be very accessible, it's supposed to be inexpensive, it's supposed to be something that you can get or do at pretty much the beginning of the game. The one caveat in this specific example is this is not a core build, this is a Tempest build. There is a core version, it is a much worse in terms of survivability. Which, I mean, it's not unusable, but this is going to be the Tempest version. I'll probably end up making a core version as well. Looks like the Balthazar just spawned here. We're going to go clear this hero power out. I'll kind of showcase the build for you guys like I do in every other one. Let's get this going. So first things that I'll kind of say, this is a basically sit and fire as long and as often as possible build. You want to be just spamming. We're not even going to break his bar here. I think we're just going to do the cheesy way, and we're just going to kill him. We're going to have to leave the room here in a second. But you sit and fire, you apply burning, you have tons of survivability. I'm not even using my skills very well. You have tons of survivability, condition removal, access to tons of auras, permanent protection, permanent might. Just a very, very solid build for soloing. He's going to hit me pretty hard here. I'm going to cast that. And then he should go to 50% really quick. And we'll just leave. Kill this troll while we're at it. But as you guys can see, I really was in no danger of dying at any point. I do decent damage, enough to solo without really paying attention to even really my buttons. I'm not really optimally combo fielding. I'm not doing an optimal rotation. I'm pretty much just sitting in fire, using my skills, and the enemy dies. The cool thing about this build, or another cool thing about this build, is there's a lot of room for perfecting the gameplay, and this is a very simple version of the build. When you want to kind of dodge that, when you want to kind of min-max this, there is definitely room to do so. It's not like this is just a boring build all the time, face roll everything. No, there's a ton of room for improvement. You can do lots of little things to make your DPS go through the roof. Alright, so he dies here. Not the quickest time, but not the slowest either, and with no chance of dying whatsoever. So pretty cool for new players. So how did I do that? Well, first things first, as we talk about the gear. This is using cleric's stats. There's a lot of access to healing in the build. The toughness helps for damage reduction. There's other stats you can run. This is just very inexpensive and something that I recommend a lot of newer players just have a set of, just so they can kind of get their feet wet and understand the game. So cleric stats are power, toughness, healing power. With how this build works, which I'll show you in the traits why this is the case, but power is going to double dip for us with our direct damage and with our burning. Actually, power is going to trigger, or power is going to be how our burning does damage in this specific build. So we get a double dip. The rune we are using is the superior rune of the Flame Legion. That is mostly because we don't have any condition duration baked into our build, so our stats. So the 50% additional burning duration you get from a full set of Flame Legion runes is really, really, really noticeable, beneficial. It also gives you power, which is our DPS stat that we're using. So perfect rune for us. The weapon you're going to want to run is going to be a scepter for sure. There's other weapons that can work, but the scepter has burning on its basic attack chain here, and decent power damage. The offhand, there's more options. I like dagger and focus. Warhorn could be used. It just depends on what you want to do. You can kind of play around with it. The benefit to running a focus is this skill right here, giving you a aura button that also transmutes the aura. If you have one instead, this turns into transmute fire. There is tons and tons of access to auras in this build and lots of aura synergy. So that's why focus on the offhand is usually recommended for a build like this. As for the relic, there's a ton of relics you can run. There's really nothing that's I shouldn't say nothing that's bad, but there's a ton of options, and the relic does not make or break the build whatsoever. If you're min-maxing and optimizing, there are relics for like burning and things like that. If you're solo open world, there's relics for speed, like the Wayfinder relic is what I choose to run an open world. But like Relic of the Trooper for shouts or anything like that, there's tons of relics you can run. So you guys can play around. Whatever you have access to, just throw it on for now. It's going to do you just fine. All right, that pretty much covers the gear here. For traits, the only necessary trait line is fire. This is a fire-based build. So starting from the beginning, gain power while on fire attunement. Awesome. Power is our double dipping stat, which we'll get to in a second. Power is great. Burning you inflict has increased duration, and your critical hits gain a chance to inflict burning. We are not running any critical hit chance in our gear, so the critical hit part of this doesn't really come into effect, but the additional 20% burning duration is definitely very good, and the other two are just not very important or impactful traits, so we don't take those. This works just fine. One thing to note is that if you do want to run like an actual DPS version of this build, very easy to do so. You just take like Berserker stats or Marauder stats for a little bit of survivability, whatever you want to do, and then you will get benefit from the critical strike chance of this trait as well. So it's something to note there. Sunspot. Gain a fire aura and damage nearby foes when you attune to fire. Pretty cool. We are not going to be attuning as a Tempest just because... well, really, in general in this build, you don't want to be swapping a whole lot, so we don't get the benefit from that. But as a Tempest, I should say, we do have Overloads, which is when you're sitting in your element for long enough, you gain access to an overload in that element, and that overload will also trigger this trait. So it's not just swapping. If you're a Tempest, you also get this trait off of your overload, so something to know there as well. Fire auras have increased duration. Applying auras to allies removes conditions. Transmuting auras removes conditions as well. This is more of like a solo type trait, which is why I have it slotted right now. If you're doing DPS and you want to be like in a raid or a strike with your friends or something, and you are filling the role of the DPS, you would take Burning Rage, or not Burning Rage, you would take Power Overwhelming instead. Burning Rage isn't bad and it looks good at first glance, but the condition damage you gain from Burning Rage is actually wasted because we are not using condition damage at all for our burning damage. I'll get to that in 1 second. So this is actually kind of a bait. The one you would want to be running is the Power Overwhelming. While at or above the Might threshold, gain increased power, 150, which the Might threshold is 10 stacks. We are very, very easily going to be at 10 stacks permanently with this build, at really 25 stacks permanently. So you'll always have that 150, but then also when you're just in fire attunement at all, you gain an additional 150. So that's 300 total additional power for being in fire and being at 10 might stacks or above. Your fire weapon skills gain reduced recharge. Awesome. When we're just sitting in the fire attunement, which we will be, we want to have those skills up as often as possible, so obviously really good. And then deal increased strike damage to burning foes. Our foes will always be burning, so we'll always be getting that additional 10% strike damage. This is another kind of thing, and kind of why you guys can see that being able to double dip in power for our burning damage here is just really good, and why this build can do so much damage while still being so survivable. So, this is the cornerstone, the capstone, so to speak. Inferno. Burning you inflict scales off your power instead of your condition damage. Awesome. That means we can just stack power and crit and ferocity with our full DPS stats and absolutely melt stuff with burning damage at the same time. So, really a ton of I think the benchmark for this build, like full DPS loadout, is like 35 to 40k DPS, which is very good, very competitive, and it's not difficult. That's the thing. So it says 10% of your power converted to burning damage. I don't really know exactly how the math works on that and the whole coefficient for your burning, but you can definitely see in testing that it's correct. Adding condition damage to the build does not increase your burning damage whatsoever on the tooltip. So, all right, so this is one thing that is different with my build and a lot of other builds you'll see online of the similar Fire Elementalist type of setup. I like to run Earth. Earth is just a very, very good solo trait line. Strike damage taken is reduced while attuned to Earth. That's 7% damage reduction for power type damage specifically. Auras you grant to allies also grant protection. This is one of the big reasons why I like Earth. We've got a ton of access to auras. we're going to have permanent protection uptime on ourself, and as a Tempest, protection is actually stronger on us than other characters, so it's extra good, extra value. Gain barrier and cripple nearby foes when attuning to Earth. This can be really kind of like an oh shit button. If you're taking damage, the first place I would go is Earth attunement, not water actually. I would hit Earth, gain that barrier, get some damage reduction, etc. So just a little survivability bonus there. Grant stability to nearby allies when attuning to Earth. Again, this just makes that Earth button extra usable. You get some stability, you get that barrier, you get all that stuff. Just add some survivability to the build. Decrease the duration of movement impairing conditions applied to you. Restore endurance when you receive one of these is actually pretty good. More of a PvP focused trait, but not terrible. You can mess around with that as well. And then this is useless. We are not utilizing condition damage whatsoever, so the condition damage gained based on toughness is pointless. Strike damage from nearby foes is reduced. That's just all the time, not when you're in Earth, just all the time, so that's cool. Earth weapon skills gain reduced recharge. We don't really care about that, but fine. One thing to note about that though, the 20% recharge reduce on Earth weapons, our focus offhands does have one relatively long cooldown ability in Obsidian Flesh. It's a 3-second invulnerability. That does get reduced by the 20%, so that actually does help a little bit, you could say, but it's not a big deal. This is another really big reason why I love Earth. This trait line alongside the elemental shielding work hand in hand. Written in Stone says, Signets continue to grant their passive bonuses while recharging. That means that you're really, really good heal Signet here, which gives you like a passive heal whenever you use an ability. Normally, if you cast this to gain the burst heal, you lose the passive, but with Earth here and Written in Stone, you get to double dip. So really cool. And then also, whenever you use a Signet, you also get an aura, which plays into our elemental shielding, plays into our other aura synergies, etc. So this is a big reason why I like Earth. Just makes you that much more survivable and more access to auras. Lots of synergies, okay? In other versions of the build, people usually recommend like Air or Arcane. If you were doing a full DPS version of the build in a strike, I would recommend taking Air, not Earth. I'd recommend the like critical strike, the bolt to the heart, additional damage to enemies below the health threshold, things like that, to boost your DPS there for sure. But with the open world survivable version of the build, this is what I would take and what I do take for just running around doing stuff myself. All right, so I did mention this is a Tempest build. I apologize for anybody who doesn't want to be a Tempest or doesn't have access to Tempest yet, but this definitely is the best way to do this is as a Tempest, in my opinion. We already touched on overloads, so first selectable trait here, Unstable Conduit, overloads grant an aura based on your attunement. Again, just more acts that we're constantly bombarding ourselves with auras, getting all that synergy going. Really, really good. Free concentration. Your concentration is increased. 240 concentration just for being a Tempest. Really awesome. Concentration is our boon duration stat. So those things like our protection and our might and our alacrity, all those things are going to be boosted for free for that. All three of these are actually decent choices here. I'm going to go over all of them. I think that Invigorating Torrents is the easiest one to use for a survivability build. Auras you also grant regeneration and vigor, which means you can dodge more and you get a little bit of heal from regen. We are running healing power as cleric stats, so we are getting a big benefit off of that regeneration. And then Harmonious Conduit you could run if you want some stability when you are overloading. The benefit to that would be your overload is a 4-second channel, I believe. Yeah, 4-second channel. With current stats that I have right now, you get 5 seconds of 1 stack of stability. So what that kind of does is it ensures that your full channel of your overload is going to go off. You don't get knocked down or crowd controlled during your overload. And generally we want our overload to finish, so just kind of some protection for that cast. If you're doing a DPS build, this is one of the traits you'll be switching. This is going to give you 10% damage bonus after you grant an aura, and using a shout also grants might to allies. So you're going to get might from Feel the Burn, which is one of your shouts here. And then also you're going to get that Tempestuous Aria, 5 seconds of 10% increased damage when you use an aura skill. Overloads grant protection to nearby allies. So anytime that you finish your overload cast, you're going to get an additional 4 seconds of protection. And then also, protection grants increased damage reduction. 20% increased damage reduction, which puts us to just about 40% reduced incoming damage from our protection, which is awesome. Because again, like I said, with the Earth trait line specifically, you get a ton of access to protection, permanent protection, so you're always taking reduced damage, which is one of the reasons why this build feels so tanky. All right, again, all three of these are actually relevant. The middle one is probably the worst one, in my opinion, for what we're trying to do. The bottom one here, Elemental Bastion, heal allies you get an aura to. Cool. Grant Frost Aura to nearby allies when struck well below the health threshold. That's the 30-second internal timer you'll see up in the upper right of this tooltip, 30 seconds. So when you go below 75% health, you get a free Frost Aura. Cool. Triggers all your synergies. Not said in the tooltip, you also gain Alacrity when you use an aura. So if I use my Feel the Burn, which is a shout that gives me aura here, I gain Alacrity from that. Same thing with Signet of Fire, I gain Alacrity. Same thing with my Signet of Restoration. All these abilities are giving me an aura, which is giving me my Alacrity. I'll channel my Earth Overload here. At the end of my overload, I'm going to get an aura, which is going to give me Alacrity. So, when you're actually spamming abilities, especially because of the fact that we have our aura skill in our weapon when we're using a focus offhand, you're going to have permanent Alacrity uptime from this as well. So your skills are going to be off cooldown even more often. Really, really nice. I like this a lot. And also the healing is relevant because, again, we're running cleric stats, so we're getting a lot of healing as well whenever we're casting these auras. Just a very, very survivable trait. Really, really nice. The top one here, Transcendent Tempest, is again what I would switch to for DPS. So this reads, time to attain singularity is reduced, which is your overload ability. So when I switch into water, I'm attaining singularity is when I'm waiting for my overload to be available. So I've now attained singularity, my overload is capable to be pressed, and I press it, etc. So what that means is you can use your overload faster. Okay. Additionally, when you finish an overload, you gain 25% damage increase for 7 seconds. That's a lot of damage increase. So if you're going to run a full DPS version of the build, you would take Transcendent Tempest, you would take Tempestuous Aria, you would take Power Overwhelming, and you would swap into Air and take the Air damage traits as well. If you do all three or all four of those things, your damage will absolutely skyrocket through the roof. Crazy damage, competitive raid strike damage very easily as well. So really, really cool. For now, I recommend starting here. Like that, like so. Okay, that pretty much covers it, guys. The only thing that I'll go over really briefly is why we choose the skills that we choose here. Starting from the heal, if I wasn't running Earth, I wouldn't probably take Signet of Restoration. I'd probably take either my Wash the Pain Away or my Ether Renewal, which is a great condition removal, a really, 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 really strong heal if you can get the full cast off of it. But honestly, all the heals are pretty decent. You can mess around with them. The reason why I'm running Signet of Restoration is specifically because I'm in Earth and I've got the Written in Stone, so my signets are better. Same thing with Signet of Fire. If I wasn't running Signet of Fire, or if I wasn't running Earth, I probably wouldn't run Signet of Fire. I'd probably take something like Glyph of Storms for the Firestorm ability. And I mean, honestly, there's a ton of good abilities, but that's the reason why I'm taking Signet of Fire is for that purpose. It gives me the aura. It gives me 2 stacks of 19 seconds for 13,657 burning damage, which is pretty great. Moving on here, Feel the Burn is just a great shout. It gives a aura, it gives might, it has damage, it has burning. It has everything that we want, and it's on a 25-second cooldown, which is relatively short. And then Armor of Earth is not a necessity. It is an extremely potent defensive ability, though. It is a stun break. It is a lot of barrier, because we're going to have a lot of boons. It's barrier per boon. So if we have a lot of boons, the barrier is huge. It gives us protection for 8 seconds, which is very long. And it gives us 10 stacks of 8 seconds of stability. 10 stacks is a huge amount of stability. So this is just a very overstated. There's just so much stuff baked into this ability. It's probably one of the best defensive abilities in the whole game across all characters. Very, very strong. I think it belongs in pretty much every solo Elementalist build out there, and that's why I run it. But there's lots of other options, other stun breaks, DPS abilities. If you're in a raid or a strike and you don't need any real defensive things on your bar, you can take more damage. That's why it's there. This is probably the best DPS elite for Elementalist. Fiery Greatsword is okay, and you could run Rebound if you want to be kind of like a supporty version of the build, so to speak. Tornado is more of a PvP thing. But Glyph of Elementals summons an elemental based off of whatever spec you're in. Fire spec is the most damaging elemental, and it also gives you an active button you can press to have your fire elemental do a flame barrage every 15 seconds as well for some more extra burning. So that covers it, guys. Also, it's just cool to have an elemental. I'll say that. That covers it. I hope you guys enjoy. I really hope you try the build. It's very versatile. You can change up a lot of stuff easily and go a lot of different routes with this build. It's very fun. If you're an Elementalist main and you haven't considered something like this, definitely give it a try. I guarantee you'll enjoy it. Have a good day, guys. Catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.